So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt Sundberg, who's going to talk to us about what's new and exciting with RTI. Matt, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Rick. Again, sorry Clint couldn't make it today, so I had to kind of fill in for his big shoes. I'll try to fill in as best as I can on short notice. But today we're just going to go over a few different topics, some of the things that are new with us at RTI, some of the features that came out in our new software. We'll cover a few other topics when it comes to some of the new kits that we have or some of the kits that you may not have heard of. And then we'll finish it up with a brief overview of the commercial product if we have time, depending on how deep we get into it today or how much I keep talking on. And then again, I will do a Q&A at the end. Just type your questions in the doobly-doo at the bottom there in the chat window, and we'll take her from there. So just kind of give you an overview of everything that we are going to cover today. We're going to spend the majority of time on the new features within Apex 10.4. Apex is, of course, our new programming platform that's kind of encompassing everything that we've learned all the years from Integration Designer. It's not really not much different in terms of the actual programming interface, but the layout and organization is vastly superior to something you may be used to in Integration Designer 9. Apex just further gives us a new stepping stone of a platform that we can build and a structure that we can go from on that. So we're going to cover the RTIQ. That's our new monitoring platform that allows us to see system files. We allow to see if they're up, they're down, something fails. We can see that happen live. You can get notifications. I'll expound on that. We have support for the mirror view. That's our new video over IP distribution solution. That is not shipping yet, but that is now been added to 10.4. So you can kind of see that we're kind of on the cusp of release of that. And I'll show you how to add that into a system file. Next, we have some macro command features, some just requests that we've been getting over the years that we can now finally implement within Apex that might have been difficult at best on the ID side. So I'll show you those briefly. And then the last two things we have, these are the biggest part of our presentation today, is improved page management. We have a different way of looking at pages and to see your entire programming structure. And last but not least, layers and sharing. This is a very integral part of 10.4. Makes your programming so much easier. You can now have layers in your programming that allows you to put different sections. You can share different buttons across different sources, and I'll expound on that later as well. Then we'll dig into the C2K1 kit, a fantastic feature that we have. Kind of adds some of the Pro Control product, mix that in with RTI, and we can spit that out inside of Apex and program it. It's just a fantastic bundle. It's very easy to set up. It's kind of a great starter package that allows you to bring everything together, whether it's lighting, security, IP, RS-232 using the XP3 processor. So it's just a great bundle to get started, and really a fantastic value when you actually look at the components that's included with that kit. Last but not least, if we have time, we're going to run through some of the commercial product, just kind of give you an overview. I do have a PowerPoint. I'll breeze through that. There's a lot of technical information in there, but I just really want to introduce the commercial products that we do have and we are now shipping. And there's some really neat devices in there that really fit problems that you may have that you run into in the field when it comes to installation. So that should help out quite a bit there as well. So, and then last, we'll wrap it up with Q&A in the hour that we have, and just kind of answer any questions that you have, just kind of a free-for-all forum. So let me jump out and go ahead and fire up Integration Designer. This is Integration Designer Apex 10.4. We're actually on version 10.41 because we always find bugs. You never know what happens when you find it. So the very first thing I want to show you or introduce is RTIQ. This is a free service that's available on any XP processor. So you have to have an XP processor. Of course, it has to be connected to the network, the internet as well. And how we configure that is if we go into our system file that we're working with, you select your processor, and in 10.4 you'll now see a new tab called RTIQ. If you select the properties and you enable the RTIQ monitoring, you don't have to. So if you have a client that's questionable, or they're don't want to have anything that's monitoring their system, they're just privacy based, you can certainly disable that. You don't have to. By default, it will not enable. So you have to physically enable the RTIQ monitoring. You'll configure your account. So basically your username and password that you use to log in to rticorp.com. And once that's configured, that will link to your account. This system file, now as soon as you download it to your processor, will show up in RTIQ. So when you go to our website, rticorp.com, you log in with your dealer credentials. At the very top, you'll see a new tab called RTIQ. And that's where you can see all of your system files that have been enabled for this. So anytime you have a new system file, it's just beneficial, obviously make sure you have the latest version of the firmware. So if you have any older existing installs that you want to get onto RTIQ, make sure you have the latest version of the firmware, because that's all it takes to enable the monitoring. You'll program it. It is available in ID9 as well as Apex. So if you're still stuck in ID9 land, or you just want to update someone's system file, but you don't really want to make any changes or convert them over to Apex, you can also have that ability in ID9. So we're not going to leave you behind. Enter in your credentials, download to your processor, and within minutes, your system will start pinging the RTIQ server, and that will allow you to monitor things like the firmware version that's on that system file, the drivers, what version they're running, how much memory they're using. It's a fantastic system that if you run into a problematic driver or something that's causing issues, that was the old problem, was if something were to lock up or something were to fail, you get on site, well, you can't, the XP diagnostics driver's not working, so I can't connect, I can't see, you just don't know what's happening. Now you can pull up RTIQ and it actually takes a snapshot of your system file, and you can go ahead and take a look at your system. Maybe you have a driver that's just running wild and it used up all your resources on your processor before it tanked. Now you can see that and see what the problem is. Maybe you had a MAC address typed wrong, or you had the weather driver and you had an invalid zip code or something of that nature. It'll spit out that information and give that to you. It's just a fantastic troubleshooting opportunity that comes with that. Also included in RTIQ is the ability to monitor devices. Now this includes not only devices that we're talking to, but other devices on the network as well. And you can have notifications based upon that, whether it's a text message to yourself, whether it's an email to company headquarters to say maybe a system file has gone offline, or maybe the customer's IP address has changed, something of that nature, a router's gone offline. You can send that information. That way you can be proactive in your approach to fixing someone's system. You might be even be able to send a message or an email to your client that says, hey, your house is disconnected, has anything changed, is the power out, what's going on? And that's an extremely proactive tool that would really benefit your customers as well as you. So you're not just running around putting out fires after the fact. You can definitely get out there on site or kind of manage how you want to operate that. With the monitor device, yep.
I was just noticing that your desktop looks really large. The text might be pretty small for some of the people. Can you do like the function zoom or something like that to maybe bring that up a notch or two?
Let's see what we can do here. I wonder if I can I lock to an application. Is that better?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's the text is much more clear. Thank you.
Okay, let me just scoot this out just a little bit, go more real estate there. There, how's that looking?
Yeah, it looks way better. Thank you.
Fantastic. There's a will, there's a way. All right, so under monitor devices, so not only can I monitor my RTI panels or my in-walls or my remotes, I can also monitor different devices. So if I want to just do a ping to, maybe I want to do my router, or maybe I want to ping my lighting control, I can just type that in, type in an IP address, and it will just actively ping it to see if it's sitting on the network. And I can just monitor that device. Maybe I have a thermostat that's maybe located in a different section of the room or a different area, but I'm not necessarily tying it into the system file. I can still monitor and watch that and see if something were to go wrong and pull that information back, and again, have it an email or a text message to myself or a different member of my team. So pretty cool feature that we have there. Of course, we have system variables as well. So if you do have a device that we are connected to, you can see all the devices, it's connected, there's something wrong, the power's gone out. We can definitely tie in any of that information and send that as a monitor device within RTIQ. Very powerful when it comes to that. Another cool feature is the actions item. We now have the ability to send an actual command to the customer's system file, all from one easy to access web interface. So if I want to have a power cycle, or maybe I'm using some power management devices, or I want to power off the system, or I just want to restart the processor, we can now have custom actions that, instead of pulling up your phone, typing in their Ddns server, connect to it, you kind of have to remote in, connect to it. Now you can just do that all within RTIQ. Then you can see all of your system files, and you can add your own custom actions built into that. So maybe if you're leaving site, you want to have a master power off, or you just want to, the customer is known that they're going to leave at X day or whatever, you can just go into your system file, go into RTIQ, connect to the system, and just fire off any action that you have without having the app or without being physically connected. And how that all works is that RTIQ has its own DDNS built in to every single system file. So you can create, georgejones.rtiq.net, and that is your DDNS server address. Put that into your phone, put that into your VPN, whatever you're using to connect, and that will constantly update the customer's IP address. So that's another cool feature that's built in, that is included for free inside of RTIQ. So very nice to have, very easy to navigate. I wish I could show you the web screen, but I don't have that up on my computer right now. But go on our website, log in, you'll see the RTIQ at the top of your screen. Just hit that. There's some instructions on there. If you haven't set it up before, there are some setup steps that you have to do to confirm your account and make sure all your information is correct. If you have multiple employees, someone has to have a master account within that. So just keep that in mind. It's not just a switch that you flip instantly. Once your account is set up, then you'll be completely fine. So just a heads up on that. Next step is mirror view. This is pretty simple. Again, it's not released yet, but I just kind of want to explain how it's set up within Integration Designer Apex. You'll actually add all the devices as expansion devices. Much like you would add a secondary processor, or you're adding some accessories like a ZW9 for Z-Wave devices, we have the VIP1. And that allows us to route IR. We can send different commands, input, output, select sources. It basically just integrates this device as an accessory into your system file. So we're not going out and setting up a totally different system or a matrix switcher. It's all integrated right into the software as kind of a one-stop shop. So it would make life a little bit easier on the setup side. You're not jumping into a different programming platform or a different system that you have to program, then you kind of have to dump that into Apex. That's all tied into one spot as an expansion device. So When we drop the VIP one, which again is the mirror view device, the video over IP, that's how you would add it as an expansion device rather than a driver or an RS-232 device. So just wanted to highlight that. Next new feature that we have is macro steps. We have kind of shortened the ability for, this especially highlights IR codes. When we take a look at, we're under our media room here, we're going to take a look at our Blu-ray. And if we take a look at our DVD Blu-ray page, when I actually take a look at that macro, or the command that's living within that tag for options, if you hit the little plus sign next to the actual command, there's a bunch of options in here. The three that we're going to take a look at are the minimum number of repeats, the repeat while the button is pressed, and the delay for 0.3 seconds. Previously, and in ID9, if you ever need to make changes to this, you'd have to go into every single code, make the change, turn the delay off, change it to whatever it would be. Just like you have here, you can change the minimum repeats to custom, and you can change the actual repeats of the IR command. Same thing for repeat while button is pressed. So if you press and hold that button, will it continue to ramp? Will it stop? You can need to change that yes, no. And then the delay for 0.3 seconds. Some devices need that. They need to they take a little bit of time before they accept another command. But most devices don't need that these days. You can kind of skip that, and that will speed up your macro time and create a better customer experience when everything starts up. So you can change that to use default yes or no. And then if you need to make any wide-reaching changes, so let's say for this entire Blu-ray source, I want to change all my defaults to yes or no or something of that nature, I can go to my IR properties for this entire source, and I can change the default repeats. Maybe I want to set that to 0, and the default delay, I want to set that to no. Now, anywhere in my system file that I have that set to default, that will be applied for that command anywhere in my system. So if you have an IR command that's double hitting, triple hitting, you need to change that to 0. Or let's say you want to speed up the process as a whole and get rid of that delay for 0.3 seconds, you can shut that off globally throughout an entire source. Makes things a little bit easier. Of course, you can always just change these 1Z, 2Z, change it custom. As long as it's custom, it will be kind of its one-off thing. A great example of that, it would be Sony TVs. They like to see a lot of a power on command. They like to see a lot of an input, usually like 5-6 commands before they accept it. The rest of the commands are fine, so you don't have to worry about those. But IR, they like to see a lot of it. So kind of keep that in mind when you're working with IR codes. Same thing applies for RS-232 drivers. That option is still there on those as well. So this is just a better example because IR is simple and easy to understand, and it gives a good example of double hits, triple hits, and so forth. So that's the new features when it comes to commands. Next one is improved page management. As you can see on my screen, before, we always had to go to a source to see our pages. And that's great, it makes sense. So I want to look at all my Sonos pages, here's all my Sonos pages. I want to look at all my home pages for my devices under the media room, my T3X, my KX7, excuse me. They're all in kind of one spot. That's great when it comes to laying out your system file and programming individual sources. But let's say you want to work on a little bit larger scale. I want to work with bottom toolbars, top toolbars. I want to keep the same kind of look and feel across all of the pages that are tied within an individual controller. We now have the ability to see that. So if I select my T3X that's located in my media room, this will show me every single page that's associated with my T3X. You can't do much for editing here. You can't move the pages around. It's simply a brief overview of everything that's on here. So if I need to make some changes and I want to make sure, a quick check to make sure all the backgrounds are the same, I can do that. Same thing for my CX7. all the pages are listed in one spot. I can do a quick check. Yep, everything looks good. And then I can go on from there. You'll still do the majority of your programming within the individual sources to see the pages, to modify those. But we just want to let that be known that you can modify them and see them all within one stop. So it makes the flow for programming a little bit easier when you're doing wide changes, graphical interface, changing the way it looks, the feel, just kind of the overall kind of theme of your system file makes it a little bit easier to navigate. So that should be a welcome feature as well in larger system files. Next thing we're going to talk about are bundles. This is something that we've kind of been skating around for a little while because we wanted to just make sure it was absolutely perfect. We now have the ability to take an entire system file, grab a source within that, and export that somewhere else. So I can, something you may be used to, we could import, export pages, we can merge pages. This is just kind of the next step, the evolution of that. So if I create I have a television page, bad example, I'm gonna grab a Blu-ray. So I have a bunch of Blu-ray pages. It kind of lays out exactly how I want it, kind of has all the programming, maybe has some custom buttons on there that I like. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. Here's my iPad. And it's just, I've made this template and it's just exactly like I want. All the programming in there's a Netflix button that doesn't get auto-programmed. There's some other features that I might be adding on, just custom tags, all that information. And I want to use that again in another system file. Well, the trick of that is we could always import, pages. We could always import the graphic interface, but then you always had to program the buttons, and anything that was outside of the norm, we kind of had to program those and build those out ourselves. Now we have the ability to export an entire source. So I can create a bundle. This is, my Blu-ray bundle. You name the source, wherever it may be, and then I can select whichever pages I want to be tied in with this bundle. And when I press OK, it's going to spit out a new bundle. Of course, I didn't set my directories, sorry. You guys set your directories to wherever you want. And then when you create that bundle, it's going to take this entire source, not only the IR codes, but the tags, the graphics, and everything, and it's going to dump it out into a little bundle file. That way, if I ever want to add a new device or a new system file, and I want to use that bundle, I can just go ahead, select bundles, and I select a bundle that I have created, and not only will it bring in all my custom programming, it will actually bring in the IR codes. It will bring in that driver. It will export all that information into a nice, neat little package that I can dump into any system file I want. So instead of having just a massive system file, kind of like a master that people kind of tend to run around with and they kind of pick and choose parts of it, and then you got to program it. Now you can take bits and pieces of that, dump it out into a bundle, and then import that into every system file. Just copy and paste, and all of the programming comes with it. All of your templates come with it, all of your custom tags, all of your flags, all that information is included within that. Another cool feature is if you're taking a driver that has all this two-way information tied to it, and I want to export a source bundle, there's an option for include the driver properties. So if I want to include all my player names, or if I'm exporting, for example, the weather driver and I've set the address, or maybe I'm doing a larger lighting system and I kind of have a standard lighting system that I use, or the nomenclature is kind of the same, all of those properties within the driver can be saved as well. So that way you just go in, you can change the MAC address, you're done. All the naming conventions are the same, that's still fine. You just point to a new receiver. Maybe there's some additional options within that, especially Sonos, there's some custom favorites that you can do A Roku driver, you can kind of have pre-named channels that you can choose from, and those will be populated as well, and all that information will come with it. So it's just a vastly superior way of doing templates. We still have templates, and it's kind of a, I'm not going to say it's the best way to do it, but you can export a template and rename it. There's wonderful information on our RTI forums that includes that. But bundles are the new way going forward. In fact, if we ever release new graphics or the new drivers that we're going to be implementing, instead of just going to our website, downloading the driver and pulling that information out, and there's usually a sample file, now you'll have a bundle that you can download and pull all that information in one piece into your system file. So very powerful. You can kind of see where we're going with that. Nice feature to have. Last but not least, something that you've probably seen as I've been talking here, we now have a layers tab on the top right corner of our screen. Layers are a way to create multiple different sections or areas of your programming window, and you can share those, you can copy and paste, you can kind of keep everything the same. We're going to go to our T3X. I'm going to go to my home page. Traditionally, when I want to have 4 buttons across the bottom of my screen, and they're going to be the same, I would have to select them, copy them, go to my other pages, paste, 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 and then if I made any changes, I'd have to go through and copy the page that I made changes on and paste, paste, paste. And if you had a larger system file, that was really boring. It's not fun to do, especially because you got to make sure all the pages are the same, or maybe if you accidentally bump the button a little bit, you got to look through and see if anything actually moves. It was a terrible way of doing it. Now we have these things called layers. In the top right hand corner, we have 2 layers on this home screen for this T3X. We have a home, and then we have a bottom toolbar. There's a few options within these layers. I can view them. This just turns the visibility on or off. If some of you had any experience using graphics like Paint or Photoshop or things of that nature, you kind of understand how layers operate. You can see it, you can make it disappear, you can make everything disappear so you can't select it. It's just really nice if you're modifying, like say a toolbar, and I want to make some changes and I want to get rid of all the other clutter on the screen. I can go ahead and make a layer invisible, so I can't select anything. It's just there. If I make it visible again, then of course I can select those buttons, do whatever I want. Pretty easy to navigate. Another cool feature is I can lock a layer. So let's say I am making changes. I'm trying to select multiple buttons on the screen all at one time, and I don't want to make any changes or screw anything up. It's locked. It's still visible, but I just can't select anything on the screen that's locked for that layer. So it just makes navigating and placing buttons on the screen a little bit easier. I've unlocked the bottom toolbar. I just want to show you how far-reaching this is. So this is a layer called bottom toolbar. It's been shared. You can see on the far right has that little green shared symbol next to it. And that means if I make any changes to this button, if I move it around or maybe I'll just scoot it up to the top, everywhere that this layer is shared will be reflected on every single page. So if I need to make any changes, maybe it's not lights, or maybe I need to make these aligned up a little bit better, I'll use the alignment tool, make it a little bit neater, make it the same height, all nice and neat. And it's not actually lights. I'm going to change it to, I don't know, scenes. That will then be reflected across every single place that I've shared that layer. Makes it much easier to make incremental changes, to make modifications. I can just share that layer across multiple places in my system file. Or let's say you want to have a top toolbar. You can do that as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and unlock the home page so I can select that media room tab at the top. I can right click this. It's just a single button now, and I can actually move it to a different layer. So let's say I want to move it to the bottom toolbar. Now if I lock home, you'll see that this is tied to my bottom toolbar. And then I can share that across multiple pages. I don't know why you'd want to, but just multiple pages, and you can modify that and move them around. I can right click this again. I can move to layer. I'm gonna move it back to home. So now with my home locked, I can no longer select that. It's great if you're taking the existing system file, something you made in Apex already. You can just select a bunch of buttons, right click that whole mess, and then move it to a layer, whichever layer you're working with. So another cool feature is the ability just to kind of create new layers. So let's just create Matt's layer. It's going to ask us if it wants, how it wants to be programmed. So this is creating from the home page, and that's the source that's going to be tied to. You can set the visibility state of a layer. So if you want to have an entire layer disappear or reappear based upon a notification. So let's say whenever the security system is active, you're going to have a screen that pops up over top of every page and everything in every controller in your system file. You can do that. Maybe you want to have a mute button that will pop up. Instead of having a single button called mute, you can create a layer called mute and then share that layer across multiple system files. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to my, what do we got? We got a bunch of stuff in here. Go to my Yamaha receiver main mute. So this layer that I'm creating new, we're going to call it mute layer. We're going to share it so it's available to other pages. And I'm just going to go ahead on this mute layer, and I'm going to create a bunch of buttons, graphics, just something to put on the screen to let them know that something's going on. So I'll create just a massive button in this mute layer. Now, anytime that the system is muted or they hit the mute button on the remote, this giant pop-up will cover the screen. Because this layer, in layer properties, has been tied to the visibility of the mute of the receiver. And then I can take this mute layer and I can paste it on every single one of these. So I can go ahead and insert a shared layer. That's a little green icon. Grab my mute layer. And I have a few options in here. I can insert it just to this individual page, or I can insert it to all pages for this remote. So now I have my system muted available on every single one of these pages in my system file. Then of course, if you're editing or playing around with it, of course, you just want to make it invisible so that you can actually, modify or change anything you have on the screen just by hitting the little visibility state, and then you can just act like normal. So that way you don't have to hit, usually you had to hit that little visibility, you can make things visible, invisible. Now you can just have an entire layer that pops up on the screen, reappears, disappears, and then you can share that across multiple pages within that individual remote. Now, one thing I will say that is not possible, there's no way to share pages across different controllers. Number one, the resolution obviously is different between my T3X and my KX7. It would just be a tiny little, I'm actually touching the screen now, I can show you, a tiny little corner because the pixels are much different between the two, and because the interface is much different. So you can only share layers within that individual controller that you have working with you in your system file. So very, very nice, very welcome feature. Just keep in mind that any new system file that you create, everything's going to have a layer of sorts. There's usually a bottom toolbar. It just depends on the interface that you're working with. iPads, iPhones, Android devices, those are going to all have usually 3 layers, a top toolbar, the main screen, and then the bottom toolbar. And you can edit those. You can create new layers. You can delete, maybe you don't like layers at all. You can delete all layers and just make one. Every page does have to have a layer. It needs to have something for the graphics to exist on. But for the most part, it's just a really nice feature to create very cool user interfaces, then share that across multiple pages. So pretty easy to navigate and work with. So if you have any questions about the layers, you know how before you can always take a button, you can right click, and then you can move and arrange. You can bring it forward, bring it backwards, things of that nature. The same thing holds true for the layers itself. The layers go in the order that you see. So very top of the screen, mute layer, that's the top. That's going to be the very tippy top. Bottom toolbar, of course, is the bottom. If you ever need to change these, you can just drag them around. So now the mute layer is actually behind everything if it were to pop up. So just keep in mind, if you do create something of this nature, that you'll probably want that at the very top of the screen, so it does kind of cover everything that you see. So cool feature that we have built in there. Go ahead and save. Another cool feature that we added, I guess the last feature that we'll talk about in 10.4 is something called Viewports. We've always had the ability to have scrolling lists, you know, where you have a bunch of different items. In fact, I'll show you a scrolling list here. We have an iPad in here. If I go to my Sonos, you always have like a scrolling list, something you can kind of swipe up and down, but we've never had the ability to swipe left and right. That's something that's new that we've added inside of Integration Designer Apex. Now, if some of you are familiar with Pro Control, how the Pro Panel app works, very similar to Viewports that we have in there, where you can draw a button and swipe left and right. We now have that inside of on the RTI side of the boat. I'll just show you a quick example of that. I have a few different pages here. There's a couple different viewports that I've added in. One of the cool ones, I'll just zoom in here. Might be a little tough to see with your screens. There. Okay, see that all right? Yeah, you should be able to see that. All right, this little gray box is a viewport. This viewport allows me to create a list of buttons, and within this viewport, I can create different panes or panels. So it's kind of grayed out, so you kind of treat it right now as just a button. You can place it wherever you want, and then within that button, you can go right-click it, edit the viewport, and you'll see the rest of the page kind of grays out, and you're now within this little viewport that's on the screen. And if I zoom out, it's tough on an iPad, especially with a small screen. But here's my viewport, and within this viewport, we have frames. So if I were running this on my iPad, and I took my finger and I swiped across this viewport, it would go to the next frame. Here's a different set of channel favorites. I swipe again, it goes to my third frame, fourth frame, so on and so forth, as I add different channel favorites. This allows me to have a whole bunch of buttons on a screen without taking up massive real estate. Or maybe I don't have to have a preset page that they jump to and it has a whole bunch of presets on there. I can create just a simple viewport, place a bunch of channel favorites inside of it, just like I would be programming a screen, and then the user can swipe left and right upon that on the screen to select their channel favorites. It's a way of maximizing screen space. It's a great way to do that. So channel favorites aren't the only way to do that. If I hit exit, it'll drop me out of the viewport manager. This is a cool example that Vincent, another dealer experience manager on the East Coast, came up with. So let's say you have a home page, and instead of having just a bunch of buttons and have it all cluttered up, he created a massive viewport at the top of the screen. And if I edit this viewport, it has a whole bunch of options, a whole bunch of sources within that, movies, television, Apple TV. And if they swipe across this viewport, it gives them a second set of options: sprinklers, garage, cameras, pool, spa. And it's just one stop. I'm on a single home page, but there's just a lot more real estate here to work with inside of my system file. I can swipe left and right, and those are my options. Of course, I can treat everything in here as just a button. You can treat it however you like. That doesn't change at all. And then I just exit the viewport, and then that will become something that's swipeable on the screen. Another cool feature, I've had people make entire pages viewport. So if I go to the draw button, I'm just going to create my own viewport here. You'll see the new option for viewport. And let's say I want to create an entire pane, a giant viewport. I have that option. I can create this entire screen, and they just swipe across, and maybe they only have a single page in their entire system file, but they have tons of viewport frames within that. So just a couple different ways to do it. You can add multiple viewports to a page, to a system file. Doesn't matter. It treats it exactly the same. It's kind of cool to mess around with and modify. But I'm gonna unlock all these. Actually delete it. There you go. So you can kind of play around with it, just draw them wherever you want. One thing to note, I guess the limitations of viewports. As of now, they are only available on iOS and Android, simply because of RAM. They're quite labor intensive to have the swiping on the screen like that. iOS is available now. Android will require an update. I believe that update should be coming very soon in the App Store, so just keep an eye out for that. But that's kind of viewports. They're a cool feature to have, great to work with, and they make life a little bit easier and gives you lots of different flexibility for how you want to program your system file. So that's about all I have for 10.4. Of course, we'll answer questions at the end. We'll just keep on rolling to the next thing here. We only got about 15 minutes left. Don't want to keep you too long. One thing I did want to talk about, I'm just going to go ahead and close this. I want to show you, show my screen here. The C2K1 kit. I don't know if this gets glossed over a lot, but this is just a fantastic value for what you get. Those that are familiar with the Pro Control line, this is kind of the step up from that. Whether you're working with the Pro 24R, which is kind of our one-way RF 433 remote, or you have a Z system that is 2.4 gigahertz Zigbee, this is kind of the step up, kind of a progression that allows you to grow with your customer. And it's also a great platform to begin with, to start and to play around with the RTI side. I know we have a lot of people from the Pro Control side that kind of want a way to progress and grow, and this is a great entry into that. And we do that by mixing a Pro 24Z remote with an XP3 processor and an unlimited RTI panel license. So that allows you to have Android, allows you to have iOS, unlimited licenses tied to this. And it works great for getting into a client's house, something, a price point that you can kind of grow with. And then you can take this kit, and if they want to grow, they can add more processors, they can add remotes, they can add more iPads, more iPhones, Android devices, something that you can't do in Pro Control. It just gives you that next step. And then with that comes all the RTI drivers. Since this is an XP processor, it gets you RTIQ. You can start monitoring this system. For something as simple as maybe a media room or a theater room, a dedicated office, a commercial space, or maybe just want to use the processor and an iPad mounted in the wall, it's a great value to get into. And those of you that are new to RTI and you're new to Apex, or you just want to kind of start sticking your toe in the Apex mix, and wonderful piece. It just works well. And the price point is fantastic. It's easy to get into, and especially those, again, who are new to RTI, it gets you all the features that you can play around with, scrolling lists, two-way feedback. It gives you that massive RTI driver list that you can add to your system file. and it's a beautiful platform to begin with Apex and programming our software and RTIQ, and it just builds it all into one. So if you haven't taken a look at the C2K1 kit, definitely take it for a spin. The value is there. It's fantastic. You can't buy these pieces alone, especially with the unlimited license. It's basically you're getting the license for free. So definitely take a look at it. It's a great starting place. Definitely something to play around with, and just begin your first RTI system, or that single dedicated media room system that you want to work with. Keep that in mind. So, all right, commercial product. I can take a look at that. Don't have a whole lot of time here. Maybe I'll just breeze through some of the cool things that we do have. We do have a full line of signal management. I'm sure you guys have been tons of emails on this when it comes to commercial gear. And we do have a lot of cool devices that are coming out that you can play with and modify and change, and there's just tons of things to go through. I'll try not to bore you too much here, but I'm going to go to some of these. I'm just going to pick out a few of the ones that are really big. HDMI splitters and switchers, VDA12s, VDA14, 41, 1 in, 2 outs, 4 in, 1 out. They're just very nice to have. Just a toolkit that you can grab. All the information is with the drivers, the IR codes. It's all inside of Apex. It's all there. There's no searching for IR codes. It's all included. Makes life a little bit easier when you're adding these devices that you may get from a third party, or really, if you have what you're working with and it works now, we're not going to force you down a different path. But just keep in mind that these products do exist, and they do make the integration a little bit easier on the side, because you're not searching for codes. You're not jumping on forums to try to decrypt what other people have worked with. And that's really the beauty of the RTI commercial offerings, is that you're not searching, you're not looking around for these devices. And that adds a lot of time into your system file that you can create and make some wonderful interfaces instead of beating your head against the wall trying to get RS-232 command to work. So cool devices there. Some other really cool ones. Of course, we have our massive flexible matrix switchers that we have that are available, that have cards that are built in. A couple of them have 4 inputs, 4 outputs. We have a few that have individual matrix switchers where you can kind of build them out as you see fit and kind of build accordingly. Another cool thing that we have is the presentation scaler and the audio mixer amplifiers. These are things that I really want to touch on today. These come in, we have a presentation scaler, VSW51. This is a device that you can place in like a lecture hall or kind of like a breakout room, something you want to have a microphone, or even our training room. We have one in our training room, has mic input. You can have a input. You can put the buttons right on there. Usually we have this mounted actually up underneath our lecture. I guess the lecture pupil, is that what they call it? Pupit, whatever. You can push the buttons on there, and then you can just switch different sources, switch different screens. Makes life a lot easier. And then you of course have the giant volume knob on there as well, so you can adjust that. Works great for recording. I know we use that for recording different things within our training room when we're doing presentations. It just makes life lectern. There it is. Lectern. You can put that in there, and kind of very nice device. It's just kind of an all-in-one, easy to use device to see on the screen. Some of the other little boxes that we got playing around with: AMR 220, AMR 350, and the AMV 340. These are powerful little boxes. Throw them, stuff them up behind the TV, stuff them in a corner somewhere. Just gives you some power. There's a couple inputs. There's control, whether it's RS-232 or it's IR. Mount them, tuck them away, power a set of speakers in a room. The AMV 340 is 70 volt, 100 volt, so it is commercial speakers, so you can get longer runs in. and throw those speakers up in there and then get full audio for that. So they're just nice little boxes, easy to use. There is ducking that's built into them for the mic, so that makes it a little bit easier to set up. And then they can all be integrated inside of your RTI system. So again, you're not searching for codes, you know what it's capable of. You can take a look at the driver and see what the driver all has. These are full featured products, so every little bell and whistle that's going to be in there for setting the volume and putting it to a different level or checking which input it on, that's all going to be available within those as well. So great devices to have, great devices to play around with. So I've got 8 minutes left. Know what more you want to see commercial? You just want to break out to the Q&A right now to kind of wrap things up? I don't know how many questions we have floating around.
Yeah, we have a few questions lined up.
All right.
Okay, let me pull those up. Okay, so Richard has a question about Apex versus ID. So he said he's been away from RTI for a little while.
Sure.
Apex looks good, whatever. He wants to know if Apex is backward compatible to systems that were designed and programmed with ID9.
So it is to a point. A lot of the graphics that you can bring in, you can always bring in a page with the graphics and all the layout. The only downside is you won't be able to bring the custom program that comes with that. So Apex as a whole has a completely different structure when it comes to organization. We have this wonderful workspace on the left, and really, I mean, you can definitely reuse old system files and bring that in to Apex, but you're not going to gain anything in terms of programming time, shortening it, making your life easier. You're better off doing any kind of maintenance or an existing system file that was programmed in ID9. You're better off leaving it there. We're not kicking our Integration Designer 9 to the curb anytime soon. So again, like I said, we just added RTIQ to it. So existing system files, keep that in ID9. New system files with all the graphical capabilities we have in Apex, it'll make life a lot easier and your programming a lot shorter. So while you can, there's no really advantage to do it. So.
Okay. All right, I've got 3 questions from Matt. Matt, the first one here, your question about a KX10, I don't have any frame of reference because I didn't see when it came in. So he's asking on the mixers, the commercial pieces you just touched on, do they have a soft volume control? How does the volume control function work?
Yeah, you can do it either way. There's the physical button on the front of the device, and then you can actually set the volume inside programming structure however you want. So
okay.
Yep.
So you can have it default to a certain turn on volume every single time in case, like again, the training room or something like that, the previous presenter messed with it. You can have it always run back. Okay.
Not a problem. You can set that however you want anytime.
Nice. So. Okay. All right. So it looks like Matt's elaborating on the question that I had questions on. So he's asking KX3 as a processor and controller using with the KX10.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know if that's the correct. I don't know. This is in 3 different windows. Oh, no, and then he just texts separate issues. Okay. Matt, will you type in and reiterate your question about whether or not things can be used with KX10s? Because like I said, I don't have a frame of reference on that. I'll just go to the next one while you're typing. John in Indiana says he's fairly new to RTI, and he's watched the videos in Apex training, and he's obviously on this call today. He said they tend to cover the changes from people who are familiar with ID9. He wants to know, is there a recommended approach, or are there any online resources to learn Apex from zero if his team is not familiar with ID9?
Correct, yes. If you're not familiar with Apex or ID9, either or, for example, jump on our website, go to the Learning Resources tab, and go to the webinars, or I guess there's a bunch of recorded videos on there, and you'll see kind of a progression. At the very top, it's just kind of an introduction to Apex as a whole. There's, I think it's an hour and a half, 2-hour video that just really tears into Apex, and you'll get to hear my terrible voice going through all the options and features with that. So yeah, it definitely starts from scratch. So start there, start with the introduction. It just kind of gives you a brief kind of overview of why Apex and how and why we need to kind of start fresh. And then it will go into Apex as a whole, and then watch the incremental videos. So we've done major releases on 10.2 and 10.4. Kind of what I highlighted today. Of course, the videos are more in depth, and then once you have that basis, you can watch kind of the incremental videos that kind of add the features as we go on. So that way you can kind of get up to date. You're not starting from scratch anymore. And then as we keep adding new features, you can just watch the incremental videos instead of watching the whole boat again. So
okay,
they're definitely
perfect.
available. Yep, and there's online manuals as well. So.
And John, I would invite you to talk to Kevin Reardon in the Carmel, Indiana branch. Kevin is a very experienced RTI programmer in our company. And also Brian Snyder, who works with us in the Elk Grove Village branch. Brian is a very experienced RTI programmer. Okay. And obviously, in addition to the resources at RTI, they're always available. So Matt followed up on the question here. KX10 with sliders view panel, it was mentioned to work with iOS and Android only.
Correct. The KX10 at this time doesn't have the ability to have viewports. You can still have scrolling lists and go up and down. It's just the viewport functionality we haven't dumped the firmware for that. So Android, iOS for viewports at this time.
And that's possibly something that might be opened up for that component, for that product?
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay.
Yep.
But we'll not talk about it till it's closer to existing. Okay. So Matt, I guess I would say, keep paying attention to the firmware rev notes as they're published. Let me see. Matt is also asking about integrating a KX3 as a controller and a keypad to integrate with a third-party matrix amp. And this is the one where he said the KX3 is serving as the processor and the controller. And it says, I think he's specifically asking about using the slide bar to integrate with this third-party matrix. Maybe this is best to handle this offline.
Yeah, I'm not sure what he's asking about the slide bar. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, the KX3 is basically kind of between it kind of pulls parts and pieces from the XP3 and it kind of pulls some memory and brains from an XP6. So it's kind of right in the middle, but its main limitation is RAM, so you can't obviously throw 20 Sonos drivers on there. It's gonna tank it, but definitely a little very powerful, very powerful little device.
Okay, and then we had, it looks like 3 questions that came up about RTI IQ.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things you specifically mentioned is if the IP address changes, it can send out a notification.
Certainly.
So if it loses its connection to the router, let's say the Comcast tech comes over and replaces something, or another tech comes over and replaces something, or something gets rebooted and loses its thing. So it will obviously, so you said you use your own DNS servers. So
Correct.
This thing is waiting to hear. So it'll send out those email notifications or text notifications or however it's programmed the minute that XP processor reconnects to the web and however way it finds its way back out to the web. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So the timeout is 5 minutes. So if it's disconnected, hasn't had a handshake within 5 minutes, but it actually reports like every 2 or something of that nature. But so we have a little bit of a window in there, and then it will say, hey, it's disconnected, or it's not connected, or there's an IP change. It will send up that text or the email out right immediately at 5 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. And then the next question is about the custom actions. I guess following up on the custom actions. Can these be created globally or copied from project file to project file?
Yeah, kind of. They're more based on tags, so you can add whatever you want. So if I create a power action, and then whatever that macro is, I just place that down at the bottom. So I want to put all my macro steps. As far as globally copying within a system file to system file, no, there's no way to do that right now. You may be thinking of the RTIQ, the web interface, as more of kind of a copying and pasting of there. There's nothing that you actually program or set minus the address of the residence. In RTIQ, everything is done within the system file.
Okay.
So
all right.
there's not yet.
All right, and then the next question is about using IQ over multiple properties. So if you've got a homeowner or a business, so a lot of our dealers are using RTI, like on bars and small business and things like conference rooms. So if there are multiple RTI processors that would all be notified to the same, let's say a bar manager or a facilities manager at a corporation where there's 5 or 6 meeting rooms, can we have multiple properties or multiple locations within a property have IQ notifications to come back to them and then see them on a dashboard so they see individually, like, oh, the training room 1 requires attention, or bar 3 and the catering office needs attention, or is it individually? They just get the emails however they come, and then they have to decipher which processor it is.
It's based on system file. So if you have separate system files, when the system goes down, it will spit that information or send the notification.
Okay.
So if the better way to do that would be to add a monitored device. So you would add all your processors. So if you do have a large system file like that and everything's tied into one, you're better off doing like a monitor device and then monitor all of the processors and then spit out an email or a text based upon that. So you can do it multiple ways based on entire system file. Either or.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, and then the other question is, so this web-based thing, is it a dashboard where the dealer has visibility to multiple properties at the same time, or does the dealer have to copy himself on each of these notifications?
As soon as you add the system file or you go into the RTIQ, you enable it and download to the processor, it'll automatically be added to the web interface. The web interface will list every single system, and then the notifications are set up for each one. So you have to go in and see which systems you want, or some systems you don't even want to see at all. You can just remove them, kind of piecemeal it together. But there are global far-reaching settings within that as well. So let's say you want to have everything notify, or if you have, you can actually set up multiple accounts within your RTIQ. So if you want to have, a couple of your employees just monitor the west side of the cities or the west or the east side, you can assign system files to them, and then they can choose the notifications that they see as well. So you can really split it up and piece it together however you wish.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question is, I guess this is this is loaded because it's coming from an AllNet webinar. Is the IQ system in any way able to report through like an oversee dashboard or a Domotz dashboard?
No, it's our own separate entity.
Okay.
So it's its own separate monitoring system. You could probably compare it to something of that nature. So.
Okay. Well, I know that when you plug XP processors in, the oversee will recognize it, but it's only looking for a handful of specific things. I don't think there's a lot of like SNMP tags that are created. So hopefully that's something, and I don't want to speak to it, but hopefully that's something that will that feature set will be more developed in the future between your offices and their offices. So, all right. Sure. I think a couple more questions came in after those. Let me pull it up. We're having it's a good engagement today. Okay, so Blaine right here in Michigan's got a question for us. The VSS 51, can it be used standalone or does it require a processor?
It can be used standalone, yes.
Okay, any limitations on the feature or the application when used standalone versus with a processor?
You do lose like startup features. So when it's powered up or when it's plugged in, you lose. Obviously, there's nothing to start up or to send a command to it. And then the I guess, yeah, you'd probably want to have a process there just to kind of configure it to get going, because you'd want to set which inputs go where, and if you want to do some other features or a volume level. Yeah, it is kind of limited when you think about it, because the buttons will work on the front, the volume of course will work, you can do your selectors and all that, but to get kind of the cool stuff of it, you'd want to have a processor tied to it. Throw a KX3 or something like that in with it. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for answering these questions on the Q&A. It looks like I'm going to go down through the list again. We addressed each of these. Okay. I think we've got everyone's questions who's posed questions. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to type them into the questions box right now. Let me go back to chat and make sure that none of them got stuck in chat. None of them are stuck in chat. I think we're good. So we went over a little bit today. So I want to thank everyone for their time, and obviously thank you for picking up, and hopefully everything's okay with Clint. So Matt, thanks again for your time, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. The video for this, we are a little bit behind on posting the videos, so please bear with us. But if anyone has interest in getting a copy of this or the link to this, please feel free to send me an email. My email is rick.murphy@allnetdistributing.com, and I'll be happy to send that along for anyone on your staff who may wish to see the video. And there are no more questions coming in, so we're going to go ahead and end the webinar now. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks everyone.